The house was old, which presented some problems. Innumerable places creatures could hide, scurry, breed. Of course, that same feature could be used to her advantage also. Corners from which she could watch, invisibly. Banisters and ledges that allowed her to surveil entire rooms without turning her head. She rested one eye. Her ears never slept. The house required regular surveillance. Objects that were slightly askew could hold great significance. They were valuable clues to the enemy's actions. Things that crawled, that had legs, those could be swatted, legs could be torn off, even heads could be bitten off. But what troubled her most was that an intelligence lay behind these movements. The creatures individually posed little threat. They displayed cunning, but not canny. They could be fooled, outwitted, cornered and trapped. They were simple in their relentless pursuit of infiltration. But the overall pattern was much more sinister. En masse, they appeared to be mapping the habitat, testing for weaknesses in her guard. What if every creature that escaped her was, as she feared, communicating its vital information back to a hidden intelligence that directed each new wave of enemy? That was something to be alarmed about, she pondered solemnly, before turning to groom her back paw. She watched the door, sitting motionless. The house was silent. This was the most dangerous time. The human had no idea. Attempts to communicate the dangers had been met with obtuse incomprehension as usual. She had tried to lead the human to a small sub-nest of the enemy. She had yelled for hours detailing what she knew about the impending invasion plans, but all of this had been misinterpreted as requests for food. Suddenly, movement. A shadow that seemed to stretch out from under the couch. A deft flickering, like the darkness from a black candle. First, she watched, tensing her back legs. See what it's doing before making a move. Get a gauge of its abilities. Mapping the room, again, it appeared. Recently the human had moved some furniture around, without reason, of course, completely changing the perimeters. She had needed to re-sniff all the boundaries, but she was glad that it had also confused the enemy, apparently. The legs disappeared under a corner. Silently, she moved up close. There it was. She pounced. She took the vile creature in her jaws and brought it back to a safer area. With a flick, she had snapped its ligaments. Next, she dismembered the wriggling abomination. This one took a bit longer to die. She studied its remains. It had a tougher exoskeleton, as if to prevent the quick decapitation that had finished off so many of its predecessors. Dissections were important, a crucial way to study the enemy, because these last autopsies were confirming her great fear. The creatures were indeed evolving, if that was the correct term for what was happening in this house. Guided mutations built according to the latest information that the great intelligence had amassed. Something far more deliberate and specific than natural evolution. It meant the creatures were adapting to the house, to her guard, to her, becoming more adept, more cunning, more stealthy, more hardy. Always devour or bury the bodies. Even capture and killing the things could be deceptive, part of the intelligence's devious stratagems. Recently, for instance, she had too easily caught numerous of the minor scuttlers. It was a ruse, it had to be, to make her think she was winning, that the intelligence had exhausted its armies and was resorting to witless foot soldiers in a desperate last-ditch effort. She was fairly sure this model of crawler was actually obsolete, discontinued from the hatchery production line. The last ones were being sent out to die just to keep her busy and preoccupied. Meanwhile, the intelligence was buying time, hoping she would lower her guard until the new breed was ready. A ghastly, scuttling abomination half glimpsed under beds would confirm this if only she could catch it. It often emerged around now, late at night, while the human was fooling about in the large drinking fountain. The human was making yodeling sounds, which usually meant it would be in there for quite a while. She stared into the dark void. To blink would have revealed herself. There. The scuttle, swish of a tail or appendage. She pounced. It wriggled even after she decapitated the head. Only when she tore the tail off as well did the wriggling cease. That was new. It had found a crumb of food. Food that had earlier spilled out of the bowl, but she had decided to save as a tasty morsel if the human was late again to bring her next meal. Doubtless, the creature had intended to take it back to the base. After making sure the crawler was completely incapacitated, if not dead, she sniffed tentatively at the dried crumb and then ate it. Baits were risky, although they often paid off, luring creatures out of hiding, so she often left crumbs here and there, but not choice chunks of food like this. Had this vital evidence been taken back to the central nest, it would by now surely be being analysed and examined by the intelligence, used to hypothesize her digestive system, and by extension the similar one of the humans. Valuable information for developing updated nerve toxins for the stings and proboscises, and whatever other poisons were being developed to use against her and the human. She turned her attention back to the incapacitated crawler. No luck. This was a common foot soldier again. Although the tail was longer and heavier, apparently serving as some sort of counterbalance. Possibly the central nervous system had been extended into the tail. She hoped that it was rudimentary reflexes and not the beginnings of a second brainstem. Creatures that needed to be killed twice. Those would pose a significant challenge for a lone sentinel like her. Surely the human would be interested in this. Surely the human would be interested in this. Evidence that backed up her many muled fears and yowled warnings. She left it on the soft pillow of the bed where the human could not possibly fail to see it. So far, the human had remained astonishingly oblivious to the menacing dangers that lurked and plotted and hatched incursions all around them. She often thought humans essentially lived in a different reality, a fantasy interpretation constructed and renewed each dawn. She liked to stare at the human while it lay prone, seemingly dead, but in actuality, or at least so she theorized, downloading its new instructions for the day from the ether. The bench is off limits, but enforce it only in the evening. Move some chairs around, it doesn't matter which ones. Food service must be delayed by 30 minutes. Remember to close all of the doors. Those were the instructions she imagined the human would often receive. Humans were fairly predictable once you'd accepted their inherent ineptness and fundamental insanity. There was no other word for it. Not only were they bad at following or keeping to the parameters of their programming, but the programming itself seemed to be literally insane. A random paroxysm from a corrupted master intelligence that garbled nonsense about rules and discipline and authority that these most inconsistent and undisciplined beings had no capacity to abide by. To effect, this volatile mix, the instructions they downloaded clearly contradicted their inherently soft and mawkish natures, sending them into a vertigo of self-contradiction and emotionality. It was a chaotic formula, but if you could accept that there were paradoxical layers in their very programming, constantly making them oscillate between pretenses of control and emotional admissions of helplessness, then their ostensible erratic behavior became actually quite predictable. And if that didn't work, you had to roll over. The sight of tufts of belly fur never failed to immediately pacify their frenzies and remind them of their humility before the superior species, ready to accept a disciplining claw. More hours, staring. Things had been quiet today. Too quiet. The long hall was dark. The various doorways were beckoning with shadows. The skirting boards were loose here and there, so when she patrolled she had to look out for mobile hatcheries and outposts. She scratched at the walls with one paw, listening for the revealing scuttling sound if she disturbed a nest. But nothing, even here. She finished the inspection impatiently and slinked back downstairs to settle on her favourite chair. A sudden thought made her leap out of it again and move to a position opposite the doorway. Routines were comforting, but sometimes they were a dangerous complacency and vulnerability if the enemy were reading them, watching them, learning them, anticipating them. She had already enjoyed the comfy chair a few too many times this week. It was time to shake up the routine, in case she was being watched without realizing it. She made a disturbance on the bench, knocked some things over, some of them falling noisily to the floor as she'd hoped, to give the impression that she was up there settling in for a new sleep spot. She pretended to groom, pausing with her hind paw extended to surveil the room. But there was still nothing. It was all too still. A thought was nagging her, some innocuous thing that she'd glimpsed in the earlier patrol. Silently she leapt off the bench top. Upstairs again, opposite the monstrous grandfather clock, the gleaming dresser with mirror, and the heavy wardrobe with the perpetually ajar doors. One slightly more ajar than usual. There, the segmented legs slowly retracting into the gap in the wardrobe. She bounded, dug her claws into the leg and pulled the wriggler out, backing away as its full body plopped to the floor. It was a ghastly monstrosity, with retractable head and a lithe exoskeletal structure that contorted to avoid capture. A hardened carapace that was resistant to immediate breakage. The intelligence had not meant for this one to be caught. This elite creature would be a prize if captured. But, if allowed to escape, it might actually lead her back to the central lair. This could be the opportunity she'd waited months for. She released the creature. She battered it, pushing it away from the wardrobe, which she had already searched today. She followed it into the long hallway. Its revolvable torso allowed it to change directions suddenly, but she stepped around it swiftly and battered it forward again. Where would it go? Would it try to head towards the overgrown outdoors? Down to the old dilapidated laundry? Did it know about the cobwebbed space under the house? Relentlessly, she stalked the scurrying creature through the vast house, pouncing when necessary, goading it to flee to try its chances. Watching its movements and inferring from its frantic choices that it was getting close, using its energy in a desperate last-ditch effort to be home safe. So she was surely almost upon the lair. "Oh, cutesy bunny," said a familiar voice. "No, not now. Not now of all times," she yelled as big hands seized her from behind. "Oh, you fluffy basket, look at your little paws," continued the human. His loud voice was alerting every enemy agent, ruining all advantage of surprise that had been hers. Worse still, it was humiliating. She needed to strike fear into the enemy intelligence, and instead, the human flipped her onto her back, nursing her like she was some human child, stroking her belly fur. She struggled vainly for release. Meanwhile, the nightmare creature slinked back to its netherworld origins. She watched it escape helplessly. By tomorrow, the base would have relocated to any one of the innumerable hiding places in the vast, decrepit mansion. The intelligence would know one of her weaknesses and be ready to launch its attack. Such a fluffy one. The human rubbed her fluffy belly. She purred, begrudgingly.